Hi, friends. Hello, the world. Welcome back to this episode of Tools for Transitioning Humanitarians. I'm your host, Asela Monova. Today was one of my topics that I have worked through for, I don't know, over 10 years now. And one of the reasons why I have gotten into coaching as well. And the topic is victim mindset. And this is a topic that I am surprised that I haven't covered in such extensive way in a long time, and therefore I wanted to do a separate episode on this only. And of course, I would love to invite you to coach with me, excuse me, as soon as you see some of the elements maybe in your life that you want to remove so that you don't become victim of whatever your stories that you might be telling yourself or whatever the suffering that you might be going through. Victim mindset is one of the main reasons when many of us suffer, one of the main reasons many of us drop or leave our jobs or want to transition or want to even leave the cause that we're working for because we just feel like we can't handle it anymore. And therefore, addressing it before making decisions is, I would suggest, one of the useful things you can do for yourself. And therefore, here I want to talk about what it is and specific examples that I keep hearing from my humanitarian clients, and then why we do that, and then what can we do about it. Right, so let's start diving into what it is. Here is the definition that I have observed in my own life and I keep observing in my clients' lives is the making ourselves feel powerless, right? Or feel victimy because of our own stories that we tell ourselves, maybe because of others that we believe that the reason why we feel powerless, the reason why we feel bad, or whatever the negative emotions that we tend to experience that we believe is caused by other people. And we also may make ourselves feel powerless because of the circumstances in which we are currently. Because we believe that all of these things or all of these other people cause our feelings. Now, the examples that you may see are so many. I will give you some of the prominent ones, but there might be more that you can definitely check and find out. Is oftentimes we feel like we may be even a victim of our own emotions, especially fear, right? We can be victim of our own emotions of feeling powerless. And these are the things that you can check out for to see why are you feeling victim of your own emotions, because you believe that you can't really handle them, right? So I will give into details of those, but here are the examples that I see very often that used to also be my examples in the past. So one of the things I used to say is that I can't really do this, can't really go for what I want, I can't really go and find another job, or I can't really whatever, because I've never done this before, right? So in other words, I'm making myself powerless with my own story. The story that I tell myself, which is if I haven't done it before, I can't do it again, or I can't do it, or I can't try it, which is not true, right? Because a lot of the things that we have never done before, we start doing and learning and practicing. One of the things like humanitarian work I have never done before, but it doesn't mean that I just stop myself from going for it. So you can see that some of the stories we use to feel like victim or feel powerless, and therefore we just don't go and pursue it. The other one is very classic is I'm afraid of transitioning, right? I'm afraid of transitioning because this will not go well, or this may not work, or whatever it is. And therefore, we don't really take responsibility for how to make it work. We just abandon that responsibility a bit to our fear and then say, because of the fear, I can't really do this thing. So that's when we make ourselves powerless towards our own fear. The other one that is very classic that oftentimes is heard is I don't have time, right? I don't have time for dating. I don't have time for my health. I don't have time for any other things because of my boss, because of my job. But we forget that we are in charge of our jobs and we are in charge of our times. And also, no matter how demanding or whatever the boss is, we are also in charge of handling or negotiating or discussing the time things with the boss as well. Right. So therefore, you can see that when we feel powerless, we just feel like the reason why we're powerless is because of someone else or because of external situations, right? The other one that I see oftentimes that unfortunately you can't see here, but I will read it out, which is competition is fierce, is another way that we make ourselves powerless, another way we make ourselves victim by saying that, oh, there are too many people applying for this job, so obviously they're not going to take me. Or obviously I can't compete with them, or whatever it is. But why is that? Why do we just give up in advance before we even try it? Why do we make ourselves victim of that situation of number of people that are applying and that just make it mean that we will not get it, right? So the other example that I see very often is I can't leave my job even though I don't like it, so I have to stay, right? This is the one of the biggest way that we make ourselves victim of our situation. So we tell ourselves first that we have to really stay where we don't want to be, right? And therefore, as soon as we use the we have to or I have to, that means we're already making ourselves a victim of our situation. And then we say that because of my children, because of this, because of that, I can't really leave. And then I just have to be here. And then we put ourselves in this victim position of our own decision, right? Even though it's our own decision, but we don't really take ownership of that decision. And now, because we don't take ownership of that decision, then we keep suffering, we keep resisting to do the job, even though we said that we would do it because we told ourselves that we have no other options, right? Even though we always have option not to work and go for something else. But the reason why we didn't want to do that is because we probably didn't want to spend a lot of effort to build the other thing, and therefore we chose to stay here. But oftentimes we don't really want to recognize that, and oftentimes, of course, it's also unconscious, right? We don't really recognize or we are not really aware of how we have chosen to stay, we have decided to stay, but we still continue resisting our own decision and therefore making ourselves feel powerless in front of our own decisions. So the way that it works is basically we make ourselves powerless in view of all the external world, right? The circumstances, other people, the past, or whatever the stories we tell ourselves, we make them powerful, meaning that because of them, we can't feel XYZ. Because of them, we can't do XYZ. Therefore, we feel powerless and we create power imbalance in our own minds, right? Even though we believe that the reason why, definitely, like we believe the truth or the fact is we can't really do XYZ, we can't really leave our job because of these things, even though we have the agency to choose to decide, but in that moment, we're not recognizing that agency, and therefore we just keep blaming them, right? And keep creating these power imbalance. Now, why do we do that is really the question, right? So if us feeling powerless makes us suffer, why would we do that? And the explanations are very simple, right? Because we believe that the reason why we feel powerless is because of the external world. The reason why I feel this way is because of my husband, because of my wife, because of my boss, because of my children, whatever it is, right? So we blame them or we give the responsibility of them causing our feelings instead of recognizing that we're the one causing our feelings. The other one is we believe that we don't really hold agency. We don't really hold the power to choose, especially when it comes to organizations and employer, or maybe people who are in higher level hierarchy than us. We believe that they hold the power and we don't. But that's again is in our mind as to how we are perceiving their position and how we're perceiving our position. And we will talk about your objections later as well. But just to finish this thought process is that there are also people who don't really give power to other people in the hierarchy or in the higher position, because they just say, well, we're equals, right? There are also those people. Therefore, it becomes everyone's way of thinking about themselves, about positioning themselves, and how they see themselves in relation to the other people. And then oftentimes we just make ourselves without the agency, without the power to choose, and we make other people powerful over our decisions, right? So we make them powerful in the sense that because of them we're choosing, or because of them we're making this decision, which is not true if we really dial it down. The other one is we don't really trust ourselves or our abilities to be doing something else, right? So even if, let's say, that you wanted to leave your job and you could, no one is going to like hold you or put a gun at you and say, well, you can't, right? The only person who's doing that is yourself, because of your own thoughts about how you may not be able to find something somewhere else, how you may not be able to make other things work, how you may not be able to get another job, whatever it is. And therefore, you are limiting yourself, you are holding yourself, and you're telling yourself, I can only do this thing, right? That's when you don't trust yourself that you can make something else work. And the last one is you don't really believe that you can do something about your emotions, or you can really be in charge of your emotions, or you can actually regulate them. You don't really know, or you have never learned them before, because a lot of us have never really learned how to regulate our emotions, understand our emotions, how not to be afraid of them. We've never really learned them, right? So therefore, we naturally tend to believe that, oh, if I'm feeling this powerless, if I'm feeling this frustration, if I'm feeling this, whatever else you're feeling that feels like very negative or like draining, then we just want to go and blame the other person because we believe that because of them we're suffering, even though we're suffering because of how we're thinking about that situation. Now, what to do about it is one of the best ways that I have been able to find solution or help in the coaching world. And also I have been helping my clients go through this, is where we really need to start understanding our feelings and start to see how our feelings are caused by our own thought processes, not by other people, but by our own thought processes of how we interact, how we receive the how we interpret, how we perceive the input from the external world, right? And therefore, to recognize that our feelings are not caused by the external world directly, but by our perception of the external world, by our thoughts about the external world, is causing our feelings. The other one we need to recognize is that we have the agency. Even though our brains oftentimes may not want to believe in those suffering moments, but we have the agency. And if we have the agency, then we need to decide what to do about the thing that we're suffering, especially if it keeps recurring several times. Then we have to also learn that we have the ability to trust ourselves, trust our abilities to do something about our situation, whatever it is. Even if we feel like it's like without any, like there's no like there's no rescue from the situation, even if we feel that, we should always come back to the basics of, hold on, what if I can do something about it? What if I should try and do something about it? Because if I keep continuing this way, I will continue suffering, right? That was my experience of the past. And the last one is understanding and learning how to regulate our emotions, to see how we're creating feeling powerless, how we're creating feeling hatred, how we're creating feeling defensiveness, and what can we do about it, or why we are feeling them, instead of just going and having problems with the other people. Now, let's get to looking at how it could look like in practice in terms of holding power. This powerfulness that we have is our agency, right? So we have the agency no matter what in the interaction with the external world, and they have the agency as well. So if we don't hold this power balance, then we're likely to make ourselves a victim. And the only way that we can start creating this power balance with the external world is when we own our own agency. And then we start looking at our feelings, of what feelings we keep having about the situation that's occurring, either with someone or at work, whatever it is, or even with our own stories, right, of the past. We need to look at our feelings. So, for instance, if I have the feeling with the a colleague that she's not doing right, or she should be doing this and she's not doing right, and I feel frustrated and disappointed, and I feel powerless to do something about it because I have talked to that person and nothing changes, then I need to start looking at, okay, I'm feeling frustrated and disappointed and powerless because of my thoughts that she should do this in this way, not because she is coming over and causing it in my brain or in my body, but I am thinking that she should do it this way, and therefore I am feeling frustrated that she's not doing it this way, the way that I think should be done. Now, just because I think it should be done this way doesn't mean that that's how it should be done, right? Especially if the other person does not agree with it. Obviously, if she's not doing it that way, therefore she may not agree or she may not understand, whatever it is. But if we keep feeling frustrated and disappointed and making ourselves victim of this particular situation, then we lose the opportunity to talk to the other person in the way to understand where the other person is coming from, why she's not doing the way that I think it should be done, recognizing that maybe the way that I think it should be done is not the only way, right? So there a lot of room opens up for discussion if we just don't hold to our position of, oh my God, I'm frustrated, disappointed, and nothing can be done about it. So therefore, we need to look at first the feelings to see, or emotions to see what story they're telling us, right? In this case, in this example, my emotion of disappointment is saying that she's not doing the way that I think she should. Now that is my thought is creating my feeling disappointment, not her creating disappointment. Her doing certain things may have triggered in me disappointment, but the trigger is coming from my thought. She's not doing the way I think she should. Now, in that moment, when I recognize that I have this thought that she's not doing the way I think she should, then I need to decide what to do about my thought, right? Because if I keep holding to my thought of she should be doing it the way I think she should, then I will continue feeling frustrated and disappointed, which will not solve any problem. In that moment, what other options are available is what I need to be looking at, because if I just keep saying, well, she should and the other person doesn't, we can't really force other people to do things the way we think they should, right? So therefore, what other alternatives we have available? But we cannot really go for alternatives from feeling disappointed or feeling frustrated, because those type of feelings don't really lead to any constructive conversations. So that's why taking charge of our thoughts of what is the reason why we're disappointed, not because of the other person, but because of how we are interpreting their actions, gives us this feeling of agency then to decide, okay, now what am I going to do about it? Right? Now, examples of how it could look like if we took charge and if we took the agency instead of allowing ourselves to feel powerless. The same examples that I've shown you before, where we were powerless in front of our feelings, in front of other colleagues or external world. Now I will show you and demonstrate you in the way that you take charge of your thoughts and emotions, right? So the way that it could look like is I have never done it before, but I can try if I want to, right? Just because I've never done this before doesn't mean that I can't do it. I can try, I can explore, and I can even commit myself to doing it if I want to. So you can see that we're not allowing the past, the story of the past, dictate whether we can or cannot do something. We're rather taking that into account and saying, yes, in the past I have never done it, but it doesn't mean that I can't. And therefore now I'm taking the agency to decide whether I want to try it now or not. The other one is, I'm afraid of transition. Yes, that's fair. Recognizing fear is always helpful, right? But getting clear even more as to what exactly I'm afraid of and what am I going to do about it is a powerful place to be. If I just say, I'm afraid of transitioning, or I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that, I just showed myself like how powerless I am in front of my own fear. But we know that we can regulate our fear. We know we can understand our fear. We know we can do something about fear. And most importantly, we can do a lot of things with fear, especially, right? So knowing that, then we can start understanding, okay, I don't need to be a victim of my own fear. Instead, I can understand it and still decide what to do about the situation. The other one is I am in charge of my time, or I create time for what I want, and I decide how to have that arrangement with my boss, right? Just not just say that, oh, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that, and feeling like victim of our own lack of resourcefulness, but instead understanding that we are in charge of our own time. We decide what to do with our own time, even if someone is above us or someone is the boss who dictates what to do and how to do. But still, we are part of that conversation. We are partner in that conversation, no matter what the character of the boss is. So therefore, bringing ourselves to that conversation in that equal way to have that conversation as to how I want to spend my time, how I think I should be, and taking into account the boss's wishes and then coming to an agreement, arrangement is still up to us. So that's why when we take in charge of our time, this is how it can look like. The other one is about competition, right? Yes, our brains may always offer competition is fierce, there are a lot of people and all of this, but it's still up to us whether we want to focus on that or not. What do we want to do with that information? Do we want to take that? Then how do we use that information? And if we're just using it to scare ourselves away and making ourselves powerless, then maybe we decide not to use that information. So even if there is competition, even if let's say there are like 100 people applying for the same job, but what are we going to do with that information, right? We have the option of feeling powerless and not apply and or apply in the way that says, oh, I don't think I will get it anyway, so I may just tick the box or whatever. Or we have the option to decide, I will not use that information because my even though my brain offers this fear, I'm choosing not to pay attention to that, but instead pay attention to how well I can do my application, how well I can apply for it, how well I can do my prep work to get my application considered just like everyone else. The other one is I could leave my job for something else, but starting something new is going to probably take a long time, or it will not be as financially profitable or whatever it is as my current job, right? Or I will not have similar privileges, or I will not have, excuse me, other experiences, recognition, whatever it is, if I start something new. Therefore, I'm choosing to stay where I am and to do the best out of my situation. In that, I will focus on the cause that I want to create or I will contribute, and I own my decision, right? That's coming from a powerful, owning your decision place, instead of, oh my God, I can't really do anything about it. I have to, and now I have to work. And then all of this like powerless, draining energy that we just carry around, which is again optional. Now, let's start getting you observing yourself to see how you may be making yourself currently powerless in your own life, in your current situation. Because whatever the current situation that you have created it, right? You have created it, maybe consciously, maybe not so consciously, maybe intentionally, not intentionally, whichever the words you want to use. But your current situation is what you have created so far. And then observe yourself where in your life you feel powerless. In other words, where you're making yourself powerless. And the reason why I keep saying making yourself, even though it may be unconscious, right? But making yourself makes us take the agency again and look at, okay, how am I making myself powerless and what can I do about it, instead of, oh my God, I'm feeling powerless, or I don't know what to do and how to do, and then get into this again, feeling more powerless situation, as if we believe that nothing is in our control, right? So let's start looking at how are you making yourself powerless in which area of your life, whether it's money, whether it's choice of work, whether it's relationship, whatever it is. And then like you observe how you feel about it, how you think about your situation in that particular area of your life, and then decide how you will take agency of doing something about it. So let's say that if it's about you not having time for dating because you just stay at work the whole time because you're afraid of your boss saying something, or colleagues saying something, right? If that's the situation, that feels very powerless because you're feeling making yourself powerless in front of your boss, making yourself powerless in front of your own timing, and therefore you're not really carving out or creating time for dating, for instance. Now you need to decide how are you going to deal with your fear, right, of your boss or other colleagues? How are you going to deal with going home on time after work so that you have time to go on a date? And then how are you going to um, go on a date in the way that feels suitable or good to you? All of this, you have power to change. You have agency to change something about, and start deciding how you will do that. Now, let me give you frequent ways we make ourselves a victim, and a lot of them have been my journey. Therefore, I have done all of this, and I have recovered and continue recovering from my victim mindset. And therefore, I just thought that if you can see these in yourself, then you'll definitely see that you're making yourself a victim of whatever situation you are in, and you have the power to decide what to do about it. So one is blaming yourself or other people. This is a classic way we make ourselves victim, right? Especially when we have mean negative talks with ourselves, to say, how could you do this? You're just so stupid, or you're not intelligent, da, 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 da. When we have these blaming conversations or judgmental conversations with ourselves, that is exactly when we're making ourselves powerless. And when we make ourselves powerless, we suffer a lot, right? The same goes when we blame other people. They should have done this, they should have done this, or my supervisor is not intelligent, or my supervisor is not competent, or whatever it is that we're blaming them for, makes us also powerless because we're making them so powerful, right? In that we're saying the reason I'm feeling so stressed or the reason I'm feeling this powerlessness because of them. Therefore, we're making them powerful by blaming them, and therefore we feel powerless. The same goes for disliking, not liking yourself or not liking other people. Now, obviously, as humans, we will always not like someone, and that's normal. But there are also situations where not liking someone may not really be useful for you, especially when you work together for long days or long years, even, right? So, therefore, you decide whether you not liking someone is serving you or not, meaning that how does it make you feel? If it keeps interfering with the way you're working, then you may need to come to a more neutral tone about that person. Otherwise, you are taking absorbing all of those feelings about the other person, right? And then keep feeling bad about the situation, possibly about your work, and then basically allowing the other person influencing your experience of the work so much that you may not eventually like even your work. Therefore, disliking needs to be taken with caution. Holding grudges. This is one of the big ones. Is we hold grudges for how people have offended us or how people have maybe treated us in the way that we didn't like, whatever it is, right? Or they behaved in the way that we didn't like, and therefore we hold grudges against them. And then we continue keeping these emotions within our bodies, right? We keep storing these emotions within our bodies. But do we want to do that is the question, right? And sometimes even we go as far as not going to the same party where that person goes. Excuse me. So now we're even allowing the other person decide whether we can go to the party or not, right? And we just keep limiting ourselves in weird ways. We keep not showing up the way we want to because we're holding this grudge against the other person. In the end, we keep suffering from it. The other big one is keep limiting ourselves or undermining ourselves or other people, and then keep feeling like we're the victim. One of the examples for how we undermine other people is we keep telling about a particular colleague that, oh, he or she cannot do this work, they can't handle this, and therefore let me just do this. And then we just stay up longer hours after work doing the job on behalf of them or for them, micromanaging them, and then feeling resentful and bad about them. It's all because it started with how we undermine their ability. And then we may always have this stories of course they can't do it. We have done, like, we have proven evidence that they can't do it. But that's not the reason to start doing it ourselves. That's exactly the reason why we need to have other solutions other than us staying after work and then micromanaging them, right? So that's why when we start seeing that how we are so prone to making ourselves victim of our situation without solving it in the way that's long-term solution, but we just take it over and do it ourselves and then feel resentment for how we are the only one who can do this, and then making ourselves victim or powerless, that's not useful. The way we do that with ourselves is like, you have probably many examples. Some of the examples that I encounter is that, oh, I can't really set that boundary even though the other person keep violating my boundaries, right? But why do we undermine ourselves? Even if we have tried it several times and it didn't work, it's not a reason not to go for doing it again. Or another way that we limit is, oh, I can't really earn that money anywhere else. This is the only place where I can earn money, therefore I can never leave my job. And poor me, and I can't afford to lose my job. This is another way of us limiting ourselves and undermining our abilities, and therefore making ourselves feel like a victim in front of the money. The last one, surely not the last one, but one of the very frequent ways that we make ourselves victim is when we start into this proving energy, proving how great we are, proving how we know the answers, proving that we can do this XYZ. Let me show you how kind of places. And that's all coming from some kind of us not really believing that we're actually capable and we don't need to prove anything to someone else, right? But when we are proving it, we're making basically other people so powerful who are on the receiving end, to whom we're trying to show off what we can and cannot do. And we're making them so powerful, and we put ourselves in this powerless position of trying to prove to them how great we are, even though we didn't need to do that, right? So let's look at the last bit of there's one more that I wanted to talk about your objections, but I want to just give you another way of looking at it is, let's say that you detected a default way of reacting to things, right? We always have one of whatever the default way of reacting to things. We may say things like, oh, I hate this system, I don't like this system, I don't like this colleague, or whatever, whatever. And then once you notice that that's your thinking, that's your feeling around that external world, that person, then make it intentional. Meaning that as soon as you notice your default thinking around it, you just then ask questions as to, do you really want to think this way? Do you really want to continue this feeling of hatred, continue this frustration, or you want to do something about it? Or if you're not going to do something about it, then what else are you going to do with this information? Because just keep holding on to how we hate this, how we hate that, is not going to help us continue working for our cause that we want to, or it's not going to help us continue transitioning to the way of living that we want to, right? So therefore, as soon as we detect our default way of reacting to things, we need to decide what to do with them by making it intentional. Now, let us come to the last point of talking about your objections, because I know that whenever I talk about how we make ourselves powerless, I get a lot of objections, meaning a lot of arguments as to how that's not the case, that we're not really powerless because of our own thoughts, we're powerless because of other people, right? This is usually what the objections I get. So people usually tend to tell me, what if, well, actually, some of the cases, maybe, yes, we are the ones creating feelings, but most of the time it's that boss that's creating my feeling, it's that spouse, it's that colleague, it's that neighbor. Because of them, I feel this, right? So if we keep continuing that logic, though, let's say that we're feeling our feelings because of them, but we know that whatever they are acting, whatever the neighbor is doing, whatever the spouse is doing, whatever the boss is doing, we all individually have different ways of reacting to it. We all individually have different feelings when they act this way. Therefore, it means that it's not them who are creating our feelings, it's actually us who are doing it. Because otherwise, we would all have the same feeling, right? We would all have the same thought, which is not the case. Therefore, it's actually good news, right? Because we're saying that no matter how others behave, we always in charge of what to do with that information, what to do with that behavior, right? We're not at the mercy of other people's behaviors. We also co-decide, co-create together with them. And therefore, we have as much power to do something about this as they do. And instead of feeling like, well, they are the ones causing my feeling, if we keep going that logic, then we should be depending on them all the time, right? In other words, you behave this way so I can feel good about myself. And if we keep doing that, then we will keep feeling frustrated because other people don't behave oftentimes the way we wish. And that's a good thing as well because everyone has their own autonomy, their own independence, their own way of thinking, their own way of feeling and behaving, right? So that's why the answer to that first objection is this, is that we get to decide how we react, how we interact, how we perceive, how we um, agree or disagree on other people's behaviors, other people's actions, other people's reaction to us. And that's how we get to also then make up our mind around it. And individually, everyone has their own interpretation, their own perception, their own way of making decisions around it, instead of depending on other people and how they behave. The other one is the objection I get a lot is why it's always our responsibility, right? Why do you always give the responsibility to us as individuals, right? Why can't they be them? Why can't we just blame them? In other words, is what they're saying. And again, I'm just suggesting how to get out of feeling powerless and how to get out of feeling victim of that situation and do something about it instead of keep suffering, right? But if we want to keep suffering, why not go and blame other people? Absolutely. It's just that we have all experienced how keep blaming others will not bring us anything, like in terms of a solution to the problem, we will not solve it. We just exacerbate it. And then when we exacerbate, we suffer even more. Now, do we want that? No. But what we can do in that situation is take the responsibility as to what we can do to solve it, right? That's possible within our power if it's the relationship with someone that we are at work or in our personal lives. We may also decide to continue blaming, but we know where that leads. Therefore, if you have found another alternative beside keep blaming, please think about it and use it. But the way that I have found the best and most efficient way of solving problems is when we take responsibility as to what can we do in such situation instead of blaming. How can we find a solution? How can we have that conversation with the other person in the way that's not blaming? Because blame produces defense mechanisms in the other person or attack, which leads to attacking or defending or whatever, and therefore we will not really have the conversation, right? So therefore, what if we just took the responsibility for blaming does not lead anywhere, and I want to be the person who contributes to the solution or proposes a solution or finds out how to resolve it instead of just keep focusing on how the other person should have done and shouldn't have done and all of these things. The third one is similar to the previous one, is when people say, well, they should really behave in this way. They are wrong, right? Or they can't behave this way because it's their part of their contract or whatever it is. But as much as we want to think that, if the reality is different, our way of expecting things will not matter, right? We may like even refer to the contract and say, you should have done this way, but if it's not done that way, now what are we going to do? Do we want to keep feeling victimy of how things are wrong and how things shouldn't be this way, or we're going to do something about it? And if we're going to do something about it, then keep the blame or keep the accusations or keep referring to how it should have been done and it's not, it may not be useful or may not contribute to a solution. Therefore, what will contribute to the solution, or what will contribute to stopping the suffering, to stop the feeling powerlessness. Let's look at that. And for that, we need to have the agency. We need to bring that power within us to say, okay, whatever happened, happened. Now it's important how we solve it, or what do we do about it, instead of staying in this, why me? Why can't I? Or whatever the ways that we keep expecting things that are not there. So, my dears, I have been doing a lot of talking around this victim mindset. As you can see, that I'm very passionate about this topic simply because I have worked through so much in my own life, and I have come to the other side. I find in most of the time, sometimes it still happens that I find myself in feeling powerless, but I notice then what to do about it and how to get myself out of it. And I would love to help you develop that skill for yourself so that you are not feeling this victim or powerless most of the time in your life, whether it's work life or relationships. Therefore, come coach with me. I would love to and have the honor to coach you to get to the powerful agency led um, being in charge mindset. Have a beautiful weekend. I'll talk to you very soon.